What does it mean for the Scrum Master to be the mirror of agility in the company? If you're an aspiring Scrum Master who wants to know how you can influence change in the company by being a role model for agility, stick around, folks. Don't go anywhere because I'll be back right after this one.
What's happening, awesome Scrum Masters? Are you ready for another food for thought to improve your Scrum Mastery? The journey towards becoming a Scrum Master is challenging but rewarding. Today's podcast is brought to you by a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer and a coactive coach with over 15 years' experience inspiring and enabling aspiring Scrum Masters like you. So buckle up and get ready. From Brisbane, Australia, here's your host, Joshua Partogi.
Hey, what's good this week, awesome Scrum Masters? I hope you're well and keeping safe. If you're watching today's video podcast episode on YouTube, I would also like to let you know that today's episode is also available as an audio-only version on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. We are now on episode 15 for the Think and Act Like a Scrum Master podcast, folks. In today's episode, folks, I would like to share with you how the Scrum Master can be the mirror of agility in the company. What I mean by the mirror of agility here is the Scrum Master reflects the behaviors that enable the company to be more agile, and everyone in the company can understand what agile means by looking at the Scrum Master's behaviors. A lot of people out there say that agile is about a mindset, but how do you actually know that someone already has the agile mindset? You cannot observe mindset, but you can observe behaviors, and those behaviors might be manifested from a mindset. I have taught many leaders and told them that sometimes it's more effective to teach people what is agile by demonstrating the behaviors that make companies agile than teaching the theories. People believe with what they see, not only with what they hear. If people hear leaders talk about agile, but yet the leaders themselves are not demonstrating the behaviors that enable agility, then people will think that agile is just a bunch of rhetorics or it's just a utopian state. As a change leader, the Scrum Master has a pivotal role in reflecting these behaviors. As you have read on Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master is described as a true leader who serves. In February 2021, I wrote a blog post on Scrum.org website about what it means for the Scrum Master to be a true leader who serves. If you want to read that blog post, link to the blog post is in the description section down below. Now, in the comment section on that blog post, a reader named Melvin asked me, how can the Scrum Master be the mirror of agility? So back then, which was a year ago, when I wasn't really into podcasting, I promised Melvin that I will write a separate blog post that explains how the Scrum Master can be the mirror of agility. So today's episode is my answer to Melvin's question. So Melvin, if you are listening to today's episode, this episode is the answer to your question. Now, as I mentioned earlier, being the mirror of agility means reflecting the behaviors that make companies agile. I personally like using the Scrum values as a guideline for this because unlike the 4 agile values that are defined in the Agile Manifesto, the Scrum values are, I would say, global and generic. And what I mean by that is the Scrum values are not specifically tied to software development. The values of focus, commitment, respect, openness, and courage can be applied to any kind of work, even if you're not developing software at all, or even if you're not using Scrum. I have already made a video on how to be agile using the Scrum values on my YouTube channel. You may want to check that video first before continuing listening to today's episode so that you will not be missing out the context. I will be taking some behaviors that I have mentioned on that video onto today's episode. Throughout today's episode, I will do my best to tie one behavior to one Scrum value, but in some cases, I'm going to tie several Scrum values to one behavior. One of the behaviors that every Scrum Master should have is commitment to have integrity and also commitment to be professional. From my point of view, integrity and professionalism, they go hand in hand. Being professional and having integrity, in short, means doing the right thing even if no one is looking. Integrity and professionalism is rarely emphasized in the Agile community, but in the Scrum.org School of Thought, this is at the forefront. As a Scrum Master, take a reflection and look at the past. When you were pressed to the corner by the management or by the customer to deliver more product backlog items, but yet you know it's not doable, did you encourage your team to work extra time? or even encourage them to skip several items on the definition of done. When things were going down south, as a Scrum Master, did you cover up and sugarcoat the information so that everything looks like it's under control? If so, you do not have integrity and you're lacking professionalism. You're not reflecting the value commitment. In this case, committing to professionalism and having integrity. In relation to committing to integrity and professionalism is committing to technical excellence. If you are as a Scrum Master for a software development team, do you encourage the team to pay attention to craftsmanship? Do you encourage the culture of refactoring the code to be clean and testable? Do you encourage the team to write test scripts for their code? If they don't know how to do all of these technical excellence practices, have you made an effort so they know how to do it? In your facilitation, do you put excellence in the way you facilitate? Did the team and the management notice that you put excellence into every event or discussion you have facilitated? If as a Scrum Master you were just winging it when facilitating, then you're not demonstrating the behavior of committing to excellence. When the Scrum Master is just winging it, many people in the company will feel that the Scrum Master is not really valuable to the company. Technical excellence also goes hand in hand with continuous learning. As a Scrum Master, if you want the team to continuously learn and improve their mastery in product development, did you also demonstrate the behavior of continuous learning yourself? Or do you stop exploring more after reading that 13-page Scrum guide and after getting a Scrum certification? And in your exploration and discovery, did you put an effort to get valid information, or did you just Google information that confirms your bias? I've mentioned about courage. Let's talk about courage even further. Courage is an important value in Scrum. I wish more Scrum Masters on the field have courage to challenge the status quo in the organization. Unfortunately, I have seen more Scrum Masters who conform to the status quo than those who challenge the status quo because they're afraid the management will do something bad to them. One of the wise words from Ken Schwaber that I will always remember is, if people hate you for doing the right thing, at least you have done the right thing. And as I mentioned earlier, this is what integrity means. But unfortunately, I have seen many Scrum Masters keep themselves safe by sugarcoating information that actually looks bad. They don't have the courage to say it like it is. Even worse, when they even encourage the team to work overtime or to skip items in the definition of done so the team can deliver more functionalities or more product backlog items. Besides courage to challenge the status quo, the Scrum Master should also have the courage to point out any misbehavior in the company. One of that misbehavior is cajoling the team and making the team to do unprofessional acts, such as, again, skipping items in the definition of done, or even adding technical debts into the product. If you were silent when you know there are critical things that need to be pointed out, then you are not reflecting the behavior of courage. Besides courage to point out the elephant in the room, as a Scrum Master, do you also have courage to challenge your own assumption? If you impose your own thoughts on others in the company, then you're not reflecting the behavior of courage. In this case, courage to challenge your own assumption. Now let's move on to the behaviors that reflect focus. As we know, Scrum is all about focus. The sprint and the events within the sprint, in essence, it's about focus. The product goal and the sprint goal works as a reminder when people are distracted. Organizations and teams can sometimes get distracted. At the corporate level, people may get sidetracked by copying what their competitors have made, even though what they're copying is not even related with their product goal. At the team level, people may get distracted with gold plating the work or using a technology they do not even need right now. People outside of the Scrum team may push something in the middle of the sprint that will make the Scrum team pushed away from achieving their sprint goal. During discussions, whether in Scrum events or not, people get off topic too far and forget the main objective of the discussion. Now, if we as a Scrum Master do not remind people to get back on track in any of these instances, we're not reflecting the behavior of focus. Some companies are not agile because they lack focus. The Scrum team is always disturbed from working towards achieving the product goal and the sprint goal. When the Scrum team is disturbed frequently by others outside of the Scrum team and unable to deliver, it's sad to see. It's the Scrum teams the ones being blamed for not being agile. Now let's talk about the value openness. Openness is essential for improving organization agility. Continuous learning, which is one of the key tenets in Agile, starts with opening up our mind to try out new ideas. We may even be open to try out Scrum as defined in Scrum Guide without converting it into a mini waterfall. People know the Scrum Master has openness from the language the Scrum Master uses. As a role model, the Scrum Master should use the language of open mind. For example, that seems to be a good idea. Let's try it out and let's see how it works. As a Scrum Master, we should build on top of people's ideas rather than neglecting it. We should encourage people to try out new practices or new techniques that may improve the organization agility, even if trying those practices and techniques may lead to failure. The Scrum Master must believe that there is always learning in any failure. At the team level, we may have heard languages that close off possibilities, such as, yes, but we don't have this. That's why we can't do this. As a Scrum Master, take a reflection and ask yourself, is the yes but wherever in your vocabulary? As a Scrum Master, we should use languages that manifest the art of possible. So instead of using yes but, we would say yes and. For example, yes, and why don't we also try this because we already have this? Not only the language of open mind, as a Scrum Master, we should also use the language of humility, such as, that's what I have tried several years ago, but feel free to try it out and see if it works for you. I don't mind if you don't follow my suggestion or my advice. To reflect the behavior of openness, we should not bring an expert mind, but instead bring a beginner's mind. Alright, lastly folks, let's talk about the value respect. I think respect starts with not undermining others in the company. I've seen so many Scrum Masters who are technically proficient underestimate the other team members by saying something like, well, in my days, it only took 1 day to complete this kind of product backlog item. How come you estimated 3 days to complete it? I think that kind of statement is a form of disrespect because everyone learns differently. Today's context is different to yesterday's context. Developing products today compared to 10 years ago is totally different. Now, take a self-reflection. When others are disrespecting one of the Scrum team members, did you have the courage to point that out? And did you also explain what might be the negative consequences when the Scrum team members are being disrespected? One of the Scrum team members I see being disrespected often is the product owner. The Scrum Guide explicitly says that for the product owners to succeed, the entire organization must respect their decisions. However, I have seen many instances where the product owner's decisions were overridden too easily with political power, and at the same time, the product owner was not even given any choices at all. The negative consequence when the product owner's decision is being disrespected like this is the individual will not take ownership of the product, and the developers in the Scrum team will have lack of trust with this individual because this individual will just follow whatever people with political power tell them to do. And at the end, we will not have a product owner. Instead, we will have a product proxy or a product messenger, which is kind of like a paradox. So folks, these are just examples of behaviors that reflect agility, and here I use Scrum values as the guideline. Of course, there are many other behaviors that enable agility in the company. I encourage you to watch the video I have already made on how to be agile using the Scrum values, so that you can have several more inspiration on how you as a Scrum Master can be the mirror of agility at your company. Hopefully today's episode can be a starting point for you to improve your mastery as a Scrum Master. Thank you for listening, folks. Thank you for watching today's video podcast episode. Don't forget to subscribe to my audio-only podcast either on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. The podcast name is Think and Act Like a Scrum Master. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. See you on my next podcast episode or on my regular videos on YouTube. Until next time, take care, be curious, and also be awesome.